Grogu's most powerful Force display surfaces when someone near him is about to die. That single truth connects every ability Grogu has ever shown, each erupting under the same conditions and vanishing the instant the danger passes. His species, the same mysterious kind as Yoda and Yaddle, carries one of the deepest natural connections to the Force ever recorded. But species alone does not explain the trigger. The answer starts in the worst night in Jedi history. The Mandalorian Chapter 20, The Foundling, returns to Grogu's memory of Order 66. Clone troopers who stood beside Jedi for years turned their weapons inward without warning or hesitation. Jedi fall in the temple where Grogu had been raised. The temple, the single safest place in the galaxy for a Force-sensitive child, becomes a killing ground in minutes. Across the galaxy, the same thing was happening simultaneously. Thousands of Jedi fell on dozens of worlds in the same hour, cut down by the soldiers they had trusted with their lives. Grogu's face fills the frame throughout, and what it shows is not confusion, but terror. In the middle of it, a Jedi Master named Kelleran Beck finds Grogu. Beck fights through clone troopers and escapes with Grogu on a speeder, fleeing Coruscant while the Republic collapses around them, risking everything to save a child who cannot save himself. The Royal Naboo security forces who covered their escape stayed behind to hold the line so that one child could reach safety. Naboo had a long history of supporting the Jedi, stretching back to the alliance between Queen Amidala and Qui-Gon Jinn during the Trade Federation blockade. That loyalty survived the Republic's fall long enough to keep Grogu alive. Everyone Grogu had ever known was gone in a single night. Grogu was raised at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, trained by many masters over the years, and is roughly 50 years old at the time Din finds him. His species has no known home world, no recorded name in any archive, and no documented history beyond its 3 known members. Yaddle sat on the Jedi Council for centuries, and even she revealed almost nothing about their origins. What is known is that the species carries an extraordinary natural bond with the Force, the same gift that made Yoda a legend. 50 years of life inside the Jedi Order, and its teachings did not take root the way they were meant to. Despite that ordinary lifespan, Grogu does not behave like a trained Force user. He does not meditate on command or move objects as a drill. What he does instead is react, and every major moment in which he reacts shares one thing in common. Order 66 was not something Grogu witnessed from a distance. The Temple massacre surrounded him, and for a child already deeply connected to the Force, that kind of loss does not fade quietly. The fear, the grief, the overwhelming sense that safety itself had been a lie settled into a child too young to process what had happened, but old enough to feel every moment of it. Every adult who had ever protected him was gone. Every room he had ever known was burning. The Force itself was screaming, and Grogu was too young to understand why. It did not give him more power, it gave his power a shape, a survival reflex born from the worst night of his life. The first time that instinct fires in the present timeline, the result shocks everyone. Din Djarin is losing a fight against a mudhorn and losing badly, and without help, the Mandalorian dies. At that moment, Grogu reaches out with the Force and lifts the charging mudhorn into the air, suspending it long enough for Din to deliver the killing blow. Grogu is small, helpless, completely outmatched. And then extraordinary power erupts at the exact moment of greatest danger. The trigger is not intention or training, but closeness to death. And when the danger passes, the power vanishes with it, leaving a child too exhausted to stay awake. His species gave him the connection to the Force. Order 66 shaped the way that connection responds, and the mudhorn was only the beginning. What happens on Navarro reveals something far more unsettling than raw strength. After a flying creature attack, Greef Karga suffers a severe wound, possibly poisonous and potentially fatal. Grogu reaches out, touches the wound, and channels the Force to heal it on its own, with no one asking and no one showing him how. The effort leaves him visibly drained. Where the mudhorn display was raw power erupting outward, this is something quieter and far more delicate. He felt suffering nearby and gave what he had to stop it. This is not the same ability. Lifting a creature is a raw telekinetic force. Healing a dying man is something else entirely. Force healing is one of the rarest abilities in the Jedi tradition, something most trained Force users never achieve regardless of how long they study. It requires a level of precision and empathy that brute strength cannot replicate. The closest comparison is Rey healing a wounded creature, and later Ben Solo in The Rise of Skywalker, but Rey had training under Leia and a Force dyad connecting her to Ben. Grogu had neither. He performed it as a toddler who barely understands what the Force even is. His power did not just fire protectively, it adapted, producing a completely different ability to match an entirely new kind of danger. And that shift happened without Grogu deciding to make it, lifting when someone is being crushed, healing when someone is dying from a wound. Each response matched precisely to the crisis at hand. And then it adapted in a direction no one should be comfortable with. During a friendly arm wrestling match between Din and Cara Dune aboard the Razor Crest, Grogu begins force choking Cara until Din physically stops him. Without training, instruction, or even understanding what he was doing, Grogu reached instinctively for the same technique Darth Vader used to kill. He cannot tell the difference between a game and a fight, and the ability his reflex chose came straight from the dark side. A toddler who had never been taught the difference between light and dark side techniques was pulling from both without realizing either one existed. That gap between instinct and wisdom is exactly what Luke Skywalker tried to close. In the Book of Boba Fett, he presented Grogu with two objects, Yoda's lightsaber and Din's Beskar chainmail. The lightsaber carried the full weight of the Jedi path, centuries of tradition built on the belief that the Force is best served through discipline, emotional control, and selflessness. That path might have sharpened the judgment his instinct lacks. The chainmail represented Din, attachment, and chosen family. Grogu chose the chainmail, and in doing so, he chose Din. The Jedi emphasis on detachment could not resolve Anakin's fear and inability to let go, which Sidious exploited. So choosing attachment over detachment is not necessarily wrong, but it is a choice with consequences. His power now develops inside a Mandalorian apprenticeship shaped by Din. The founding tradition runs deep in Mandalorian culture. A child taken in under the creed is raised as a full member of the clan, carrying the same rights and duties as one born into it. Many of Grogu's most important lessons now happen through lived danger rather than temple structure. Every mistake carries real weight. The Force choke already proved what can happen when instinct fires without understanding. Whatever sharpens Grogu's abilities will not come from a controlled environment. It'll be forged, moment, by life, and nothing about that path guarantees his judgment will catch up to his instincts before they fire again. The Jedi path might have given him structure. The Mandalorian path gives him something harder to measure, the constant presence of someone who loves him enough to let him face real danger. Against the Rancor, Grogu's instinct produced the last thing anyone expected. A rampaging Rancor tears through Mos Espa in the Book of Boba Fett, enormous, violent, and destroying everything in its path. Grogu does not fight it, overpower it, or contain it behind a barrier. He walks toward it. A child smaller than one of its claws reaches out with the Force and soothes the creature, calming its rage until the Rancor lies down beside him. The Rancor was the biggest physical danger Grogu had ever faced, and his response did not produce the biggest force push or the strongest hold. It produced gentleness. Boba Fett had raised his own Rancor from the moment the Hutt twins gifted it to him, bonded with it over months, and it still rampaged through Mos Espa when it lost control. Grogu calmed a Rancor he had never met mid-rampage through the Force alone. No bond, no history, no preparation. Just a child reaching out to a creature in pain. A 50-year-old toddler sitting in front of a creature that could crush him without effort chose connection over control, and the Rancor responded. Ahsoka Tano calmed an animal through the Force as a toddler in Tales of the Jedi, but she did it in a peaceful moment, surrounded by her family on a quiet world. Grogu did it in the middle of a battle, surrounded by chaos, with no one guiding him. Each time his power fires, it did not just repeat, it becomes something new. Against the mudhorn, he pushed. With Karga, he healed. With Cara, he attacked. And with the Rancor, he connected. The ability changes every time, shaped entirely by what the moment needs, rather than what Grogu consciously chooses. The Season 3 finale changes what Grogu might actually be. Axe Woves crashes a light cruiser into Moff Gideon's base, and the fireball swallows everything. The heat and the blast wave fill the corridor in the same instant. Din and Bo-Katan are standing in the open with no cover, no ship to flee to, and no time to move. Grogu projects a force shield around both of them, holding it long enough for the people on either side of him to survive. A child who cannot speak in full sentences just shielded 2 warriors from a cruiser-scale explosion, and he did it because the people he loves were about to die. The shield holds during the battle to reclaim Mandalore itself, a home world the Empire had bombed and poisoned during the Night of 1,000 Tears. The Empire deployed fusion bombs and orbital bombardment against the Mandalorian people, turning the surface into glass and scattering the survivors across the galaxy. Mandalore had been declared cursed and uninhabitable. The battle to reclaim it was supposed to be a homecoming, and it nearly ended in another massacre. What Grogu shields Din and Bo-Katan from is not just fire, it is the final act of a war to take back what was taken from an entire civilization. Most Jedi spend decades learning to consciously project force barriers under pressure. Grogu did it instinctively, mid-explosion, before he could form a complete sentence. A shield at that scale, held under that kind of pressure, would challenge a trained Jedi Knight with decades of experience. Grogu held it as a toddler. He may not just be gifted, he may experience the Force on a fundamentally different level. Where trained Jedi build toward mastery through years of deliberate practice, Grogu arrives at the same abilities through pure reflex, reaching into corners of the Force that most Jedi never find in a lifetime. He does not use the Force in smaller, casual ways. He steals cookies from a classmate, spins himself in a chair, and uses Force-enhanced reflexes during a sparring match. But there is a vast difference between nudging a snack across a table and holding a shield against a cruiser explosion. His range across these displays is unusual, and none of it responds to intention or command. The same child has moved objects, healed a dying man, calmed a massive creature, and held a shield against an explosion, each appearing on its own and vanishing just as quickly. No trained Force user in recorded history has demonstrated that breadth of ability at Grogu's age. His abilities do not follow the Jedi path, the Sith path, or the path of the Chosen One. They are something the galaxy has not seen before, and they bridge two traditions that have always been kept apart. The Jedi valued the Force as a tool for maintaining peace through emotional distance, while Mandalorians valued strength as a way to protect their own through fierce commitment. Season 3 reintroduces the mythosaur beneath the waters of Mandalore, the ancient symbol of Mandalorian conquest and leadership. The mythosaur skull appears on every Mandalorian signet, a reminder of the creature their ancestors once rode into war. Bo-Katan encounters the living mythosaur, not Grogu, but the creature represents raw dominance. Grogu's instincts keep pointing towards something different, not mastery, but connection, and he is not the first to stand between both worlds. The closest president in galactic history is Tari Vizsla, the first Mandalorian accepted into the Jedi Order. He created the Darksaber by fusing Jedi craft with Mandalorian warrior identity, and after his death, the weapon became a symbol of Mandalorian leadership. Grogu now carries that same overlap forward. His power is Jedi in nature and Mandalorian in purpose, and no one taught him to combine the two. The people who shaped him, temple masters and a bounty hunter father, gave him both halves without knowing it. It emerged through the simple, unplanned act of a warrior choosing to love a child. No one designed this overlap, no council approved it, and no prophecy predicted it. Grogu was shaped by love from both traditions before he was old enough to know they were supposed to be enemies. Vizsla earned his place in both worlds through discipline and mastery. Grogu earns his through something older and harder to replicate. Instinct shaped by loss and sharpened by the people he loves. Moff Gideon tried to steal everything Grogu and Din built through love. His arc across the Mandalorian is built entirely on theft, and the precision of what he steals is what makes his failures so revealing. He takes the Darksaber, the very weapon Vizsla forged as proof that Jedi and Mandalorian could exist, and treats it as a trophy rather than a legacy. The blade had changed hands through combat, sacrifice, and trust across generations, growing heavier in unworthy hands. Gideon bypassed all of it. He wraps himself in Beskar armor without following the creed, belonging to a clan, or earning the right to lead. Every symbol he wears was taken from someone who earned it, and none of them fit him. He captures Grogu and extracts his blood, attempting to isolate the source of Force power and transfer it into his own clones. The Season 3 finale reveals the full scope of this project, including Dr. Pershing's work on genetic alteration. Gideon treats the Force as something that lives in blood chemistry, a substance to be harvested, refined, and injected into a body grown in a tank. He believes that if the Force lives in blood, then blood can be owned. To him, Grogu is not a child, but raw material. His endgame is clones grown from his own genetic template, enhanced, armored in Beskar, and commanded by him alone. Every one of them is a copy of himself, built to serve a man who never earned anything he wears. He stands in that armor, surrounded by those clones, inside a base built beneath Mandalore itself. While Gideon was engineering that vision, Grogu was falling asleep in the cockpit of a gunship, curled against the arm of the man who chose him. One of them surrounded himself with technology and stolen symbols. The other was held by someone who wanted nothing from him except to keep him safe. When stolen power and earned power finally collide, only one survives. Gideon built himself into everything the Empire believed a leader should be. He has more weapons, more soldiers, and an entire philosophy of engineered dominance behind every decision. Din destroys the clone tanks before the project can emerge. Grogu holds the force shield while Gideon burns behind it. Gideon, backed by everything he believed would make him unstoppable, is consumed by the blast his engineered power could not survive. The Force-sensitive child he tried to turn into raw material is the one who walks out alive. What comes after is not a battle, it is a ceremony. Grogu's formal adoption as Din Djarin's son and apprentice, spoken into existence by choice. In Mandalorian tradition, the adoption oath is witnessed by clan members and sealed by name, binding the foundling to the creed as fully as any warrior born into it. The adoption does not create something new, it names something that has been true since Din first refused to hand a child over to the Imperials, walking away from the bounty that brought them together in the first place. Temple Masters taught him over years. Keller and Beck's rescue kept him alive, and Din's choice gave him a Mandalorian name. A foundling taken in under the creed and named as a son in front of witnesses. Every element of Grogu's identity was built through relationship, not engineering. Gideon looked at Grogu and saw a resource. Din looked at Grogu and saw his son. That should have been the end of it. But Gideon was never the only one willing to use a Force-sensitive child. The Jedi took infants from their families and raised them as instruments of the Order. The Empire hunted Force-sensitive children and turned them into weapons. Every institution in this galaxy that has encountered a child with this kind of power has found a reason to use it, and every generation told itself the reasons were different this time. The New Republic may not cage Grogu the way Gideon did, but it may still ask him to serve before he fully understands what service costs. The upcoming film gives Grogu a new role, Apprentice. For 3 seasons, the story was about Din protecting Grogu. The film shifts that ground. Gideon stole Grogu's power through violence, and everyone could see the crime in it. When a legitimate government asks for the same power with a handshake instead of a cage, the line between service and use gets harder to see. Din is no longer just shielding Grogu, but actively preparing him, teaching him, and fighting alongside him. Every decision he makes carries the awareness that Grogu will outlive him by centuries, and that shapes the kind of father he's becoming, one who prepares his child for a future without him. It is the heaviest kind of love, building something you will never see finished. The arc lands on a single idea: the old protect the young, and then the young protect the old. The child who was always protected is about to become the protector. By every measure that matters, raw strength, precision, rarity, and scale, Grogu has exceeded what should be possible for someone with no formal training and no deliberate control. He is more powerful because the real measure was never what he could do on command, it was always what he would do when it mattered, and for whom. Every adult in Grogu's life puts themselves between him and harm. Keller and Beck at the Burning Temple, Din shielding him from Imperials, Luke offering him a path. Now the galaxy is about to ask a 50-year-old toddler to carry that same impulse into the unknown, not because he's ready, but because he is needed. The deeper question is not just what Grogu can do, but what his species was always meant to become. Only 3 members have ever been seen in the entire history of the galaxy. Yoda shaped the Jedi Order across 9 centuries. Yaddle sat on the council in silence, guarding knowledge she never shared. Grogu is the youngest, the least trained, and the one whose instincts have already exceeded what either of them displayed at his age. The more that gets uncovered about this species, the clearer it becomes that their future may already be sealed, and everything Grogu carries forward began with the one who came before him. 900 years of wisdom, war, and exile shaped the Jedi Order itself, and that full story, from his earliest days to his final breath, is still waiting to be told.